Hi, this is Dr. Emma Offord, host of This Voice is Mine, the Unquiet podcast. For every neurodivergent mind that was masked, misread or missed, where identity is reclaimed and the system gets named, This Voice is Mine is a podcast for those who were told they were too much, too sensitive, too chaotic, too intense or not enough. Hosted by myself, Dr. Emma Offord, a clinical psychologist, neurodivergent woman and unapologetic system disruptor. This podcast explores what happens when difference is pathologized and what becomes possible when we drop the shame, the script and the medical model. Through stories, reflections and conversations with people who were never meant to fit, This Voice is Mine reclaims the truth of neurodivergent minds, bodies and ways of being. This is not about fixing or fitting in. It's about remembering who we are and unlearning everything they got wrong. Today's guest is someone who has spent decades helping people reconnect with themselves in a way that is both practical and deeply compassionate. Suzy Reading is a chartered psychologist and author of 10 books and one of the UK's most respected voices on self-care, self-advocacy and sustainable well-being. Her work brings together psychology, yoga and decades of experience in the health and well-being field, supporting people to build healthier, more sustainable relationships with themselves. But what I particularly appreciate about Suzy's work is that she doesn't treat self-care as a checklist or a luxury. Instead, she invites us to look honestly at the way we relate to ourselves, the expectations we carry, and the patterns of overgiving that so many people quietly live inside. Her latest book, How to Be Selfish, challenges one of the most loaded words in our culture and asks what might change if we reclaimed it. Suzy Reading, welcome to the podcast. It's so lovely to have you here.
Thank you for such a lovely warm welcome. It's a joy.
So today we have the lovely Suzy Reading. We also have Ashlyn, Jolene and Joe from Divergent Life. And Suzy, for our listeners who maybe they're not as familiar with your work, would you mind just saying a little bit about yourself and your new book?
Sure.
Yeah.
So I'm a chartered psychologist.
Mm-hmm.
I specialise in stress, loss and change.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's a function of my life experience. I think I became a mum at the same time as losing my dad to motor neurone disease.
Right.
And at the time I thought that was really informing me as to the value, the importance, the necessity of self-care.
Mm-hmm.
But I think probably in the benefit of hindsight and with the advent of perimenopause, I actually think that journey was much bigger than self-care. It was teaching me the skills of self-advocacy so that, this is not just about me connecting with my needs and connecting with my feelings and doing my best to gently tend. Mm-hmm. It was also educating me about how important it is that we speak up and we voice our needs and we allow ourselves to receive. So that's where How to Be Selfish came from, because I'd written 9 books sharing my self-care toolkit, and still either people are nodding in agreement and they're doing it and they're still feeling fried and frazzled and fed up because self-care alone is not enough. We need to also receive. Yeah. Or they're still feeling like it's something they would like to do, but they feel guilty about it. So I needed to address these things, and that's where How to Be Selfish came from.
Well, we'll deep dive into all of that. I have to say, I absolutely love this book, and I was saying to everyone earlier, I wanted to highlight some parts that I really enjoyed, and then I just found I was highlighting the entire book. So I stopped. Just read the book and absorb it and go back. But there's so much clarity in here, and it has really spoken to me. Let's start perhaps so with the title, How to Be Selfish, because that is such a provocative word, isn't it, for so many people?
Yes.
Can you tell us a little bit about how you arrived at that title?
I have to be totally honest, that was not my choice.
Okay.
And it was something that I felt quite uncomfortable with. Originally, I wanted there to be a hyphen between self and ish, but then when the designer was able to separate the word into 2, so self is on top and ish is beneath it, it's sort of, I'm hoping that is a visual representation of this. This is, I'm not encouraging people to be stingy, miserly, greedy, uncaring. That's abhorrent to me. But this is about healing our relationship with self. Yeah. And I do feel that we need to take a look at our understanding of selfish, because generally when I'm speaking with clients or I'm having conversations on social media or corporate talks, what I'm hearing is that people are saying, I feel selfish when I'm resting, when I'm prioritizing my sleep needs, when I say no, or when I lean on people, even to the point where even accepting help that's offered we feel is selfish. Now, none of those things are selfish. So that's why I wanted to address it, because all of those things are self-advocacy.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it needed, the word selfish needs some reclaiming. But also I think we need to take a look at selflessness and understand that that's not the virtue that we've been led to believe it is.
Yeah.
It's a coping mechanism, isn't it?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love all of that. And just, I'm aware that is, something that I experience quite a lot, in particular as a mum. I think that's where self-advocacy went out the window.
Yeah.
No one particularly suggested that I should be doing things in a particular way. It almost just came naturally to start to kind of have a relationship with myself in that way.
Yes.
Because caring for others became just this all-encompassing thing, and then self-care for myself just was unrecognisable. Wasn't really part of my life, and that's still something I'm trying to work out.
I think I got a quite little kind of question, Suzy. Like, one of the things I really notice is, and you highlighted this, Emma, like self-care has become like a checklist. And I found like a couple of years ago, it's like, right, if I do this, I do this, I do this, I do this, I'm going to feel this. Whereas, and it's more of then like a survival strategy rather than actually, if I do this and really embody it and feel into it, that's the self-care. But it's become such a thing of you've got to do these things in order to feel well, rather than actually feel those things.
Yeah, they can become a bit performative.
Exactly.
Another form of striving.
Or
Or we're exercising, but we're exercising to be deemed as socially acceptable, and then that somehow changes the energetic of it. Or you can do a restorative practice and then berate yourself for all the things that you haven't got done and negate the benefit of it.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah, it feels like something you have to do in order to feel well or feel grounded. But the very kind of intention behind it is that you have to, which, like you say, changes the whole energy.
It does. It changes how we feel about it.
And it feels like as well there's so many stages of when that self-care and kind of selfishness comes in, like we said about motherhood. That's perhaps maybe our first, for many of us, kind of time where we're like, hang on a minute, I'm really taking off, sort of looking after other people. I need to look after myself in order to do that. And then as we get older, and perhaps there's a sandwich generation stuff, we've got our own kids, elderly parents, we're going through peri, perhaps it's non-negotiable that you're okay, and yet it's that that narrative is still so embedded, isn't it, especially in women, I think, that it's terrible to be doing this, that I need to take these little snippets of time, these little I used a phrase once, I think, with a friend that was something like sips of joy or something, and I hated myself for even saying it. It's like, we deserve like way more than that.
Absolutely.
And yet sometimes that's all you've got, isn't it? Just that little bit of like oxygen. And maybe that's all you have at that point in time. And then later on you need to build in more selfishness.
Yes.
And there's something about the ishness of it that stood out as well. I hadn't really deconstructed that word until you'd, named the hyphen in the, it's the kind of ishness. It kind of speaks to the vagueness of what self-advocacy is, maybe.
Yeah. It's like it's taking back the right to self, the right to have needs, the right to have feelings. And I don't know about you, but I can remember feeling like when I was pregnant, I sort of felt like I was on a pedestal. Everyone was inquiring, making sure that I was okay, and all of my needs were met because I was this sacred vessel. And then you give birth, and then somehow it's like everything is, all the attention is on the child. And I don't know, it felt like such a stark contrast. And I think for me, it was like the collision of life events. My dad was in intensive care. My mum was looking after him. I wanted to be there for my parents. I wanted to be there for my sweet little cherub. And there was this drive to be all things to all people. And I learnt really hard and fast that we can't. It's not humanly possible. And, you know, that drive to be selfless was actually the thing that interfered with me being who I aspired to be as a daughter, a mum, a wife. You know, we sort of look at all of the things that are required of us. Really, the question needs to be, what do I need to do what's required of us, rather than what do I need to do?
Oh, that's a really good point, isn't it?
It is. Yeah.
Do you think, Suzy, that there's something gendered here that we're all kind of implicitly speaking to? Because it feels like, and I don't want to overstate this or make generalizations, but it does feel like there's something in our socialization that perhaps a male who is advocating or who might be perceived as being selfish is celebrated in some way, and actually you're kind of seen, and that's how you make it to the top. A woman who is doing that it feels like is actively discouraged from doing that, but turns into something that is less palatable kind of socially. And part of me was wondering if you could speak to I guess, whether you felt that your book sits more, I guess, with females and kind of speaking to kind of their needs, and how you might see selfishness being different for these two groups, but in this kind of palatable, good way that we want, rather than the opposite. Really.
I think you're absolutely onto. Yeah, what we're speaking to is the gender conditioning that we've been marinating in since birth.
Oh, I love that.
So, yes.
So well.
So I've written How to Be Selfish essentially for perimenopausal women.
Yeah. Okay.
I think there are other generations of women who don't need this book. I am delighted that my teenage daughter doesn't need this book, because we will watch dated films and I'll be like outraged. Women shouldn't be conceptualized in that way. And she's like, Mum, I know, it's all right. I'm like, thank God. Yes. Okay. But I would say there are still many generations of women that need this book. I think across the board, if you look at how we raise children, I think there are issues in terms of how the language we use impacts on how we feel about our right to have needs and our right to have feelings. So the fact that we have a notion of a good and a bad baby itself is toxic. Yeah. But we all know that a good baby is one that doesn't cry, it's convenient, doesn't trouble its parents. So
Sleep through the night.
Yeah. So I think we've been raised to believe that it's, you know, you're a good human being if you don't trouble others. And still, okay, historically, you know, children should be seen and not heard. And thank God we've moved on from that. But really, I question how far we've moved on from that, because still it's our children would understand that a good child is one that doesn't talk back to adults. I can remember going to assemblies at my kids' primary school, and the teachers were madly hushing all the kids to sit in silence. And the parents who'd come to see their kids perform, they're just having a lovely little natter at the back. And I'm like, why do the kids have to be sit in silence? Like, it's so abnormal. Right? And they spend so much of their day being shushed and cajoled into, you do this thing at this time. Yeah, so from all of those childhood experiences, I think it makes our own human needs feel like we're less than for having them. But then, gender conditioning shapes that. And there are certain emotions that are acceptable for men and unacceptable for men, likewise for women. It's all unhelpful. Yeah. The fact is, we need all of our emotions. They all have an evolutionary purpose. And if we're led to believe that a good woman doesn't display anger and a good man is not vulnerable or doesn't share sadness, you know, it harms everybody. But absolutely, it's reclaiming our right to feel. So that's one of the steps to taking back our power. But I think it really helps to understand what's led us to these beliefs, that we've got to be selfless, we mustn't be selfish, we've got to be resilient, we've got to be self-reliant. And until we hold them up to the light, they're going to keep shaping how we think and feel and choose.
Absolutely. Yeah. I'm just remembering a time where I think it must have been when I was approaching perimenopause, and so the sustainability of how I was, my role in the home was not sustainable, and I really started saying no. It just started happening. Wasn't really necessarily consciously trying to do it. I just couldn't do certain things. I do remember my husband turning around in complete surprise this one day, and he went, "You've changed." And he but I changed. It was the reclaiming. So I hadn't changed.
Yes.
Actually, the role had changed me.
Yes.
And I'd fallen into it. And
Yes.
years down the line, I was really starting to question it. And it was just kind of coming out, bursting out in this sort of way. Because I think I just reached a limit that, you know...
Yeah. You can't keep doing it.
Yeah.
And this is something I hear so often in my consulting room. My clients come to me saying, I can't do this anymore. And they feel like it's a terrible failure. And I'm like, no, this is a triumphant turning point. You can't do this anymore.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean you can't keep going. It just means that you can't do it in this shape.
Yeah.
And it's okay to find a different incarnation of self. It's okay to find a flexible expression of your values.
Yeah.
It's okay for your values to also include you.
Yeah.
It's fine if you can't do that anymore, because there's so much else out there that you can do, and it can take a different shape.
I love that.
That's what I was thinking. That is beautiful.
It's not a failure.
No,
It's not a failure.
no.
Yeah.
And do you know what? I ask myself regularly, how many times would I need to clone myself? How many times over? How many of me would I need to be able to do all the things that I'd like to do to the degree or the standard to which I'd like to do them?
Wow.
Yeah, I'm thinking,
true.
okay, there needs to be one for each child, one for my husband, one for my business, one for my family of origin. I'm at least 10 by now.
Yes.
Okay, can we give ourselves permission to fail at what's humanly impossible? I'm just one person.
Yeah.
Just one.
Yeah.
Not the resources of 10.
Yeah.
And actually, I'm thinking, you know, I'm hearing this, you know, self-reclamation that I know many of us are having in the perimenopausal stage, and you know, when the hormones exit stage left, and the people-pleasing goes, and we're like, hang on a minute, and it just feels so important that we can, you know, recognise that, yes, but also kind of forgive ourselves, our younger selves. I've been, you know, doing quite a lot of that in reflection. It's like, I'm so sorry I didn't have boundaries, and I'm so sorry I didn't realise we could say no.
Yes. I'm so glad you've raised that. And coming back to what you were saying earlier about sort of self-care feeling like a checklist, from my perspective, I loved, Emma, you said it so beautifully, self-care is our relationship with self. This is a new understanding for me, and it came from researching the book. This is all about our relationship with self. So much of that is skills-based. And I think we don't talk enough about the power of things like self-forgiveness. I think it's crucial in healing our relationship with self. And so it's not an extra thing to be done. It becomes a lens through which we see life.
Yeah.
That makes so much sense, it being a skill, because, you know, what we were talking about earlier in terms of gender differences, maybe we didn't get to we weren't taught those skills of saying no and self-advocacy, or even recognising what, you know, having that connection to our own self, being embodied, and understanding that.
Yes, our body's for everyone else, isn't it?
Oh, yes, yeah.
So how on earth do we prioritise self when yes, that's such a good point, Emma.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So, I think that's why I'm highlighting every line of your book, because this is another skill and here's another one, because we don't have it. It doesn't come naturally. And what I've noticed as I'm starting to say no and change the shape of myself and how I do things in the home and in other places of my life, that it seems like I'm angry. People are responding like, it's one thing for me to change the shape of how I do things, but how others receive me changing that shape is then another layer of what I have to deal with. And the experience for some people is that you're angry, and I'm not angry. I mean, at times I feel angry, but it's not always anger. Saying no seems like I'm angry to other people.
Sometimes it's just direct.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's clarity, but when it's a shift, it can feel really confronting for someone who's used to you saying yes all the time.
Yeah.
Not everyone's going to like it.
No.
Exactly. And I think that's what a lot of people experience, and certainly that's what a lot of women share with me, that when they start to say no and self-advocate, it's not that well received, and it's not that easy
But
to do.
then you get called selfish, don't you?
Yes.
Yes.
But I think what you're talking to, Emma, is a really important point in terms of it's not just what we do in terms of these acts that we're trying to reclaim, but how we do it and how we embed it.
Yeah.
And then it also feels like it's about the courage to have the willingness to sit with the mind telling you that you are less palatable as a woman or will be criticised or rejected. And then when that happens, because I think people are up for you often looking after yourself if it doesn't negatively impact them.
Yes.
But as soon as it is that extra layer then of what you've got to sit with, I think it becomes almost like a radical act of like rebellious claiming of self in that space to sit with all of those layers. I think that's where women become unstuck.
Yes.
Because it becomes, the system's flooded, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's like, I can't stay here. And that's when I think you see this oscillation, probably of rage, of people moving from this passive, I'll just let it all go, to this is so unworkable.
Absolutely.
I'm going to embed this again.
I think the rage is really important that we speak to it, because if you understand anger is there to galvanise you, to take action in service of your values, or to protect those in your care, including yourself. And as women, we've been taught that anger is not okay. However, we need anger to help to metabolise us, to do things differently. So I want people to listen to their anger. I want people to listen to their resentment, because quite often what lies beneath resentment is unmet needs. Sometimes they're unvoiced needs. And so this is not just about soothe your anger away. No, we need to use it as fuel. That doesn't then mean that we have the right to do harm with our anger. We need to be careful in how we express ourselves. But certainly please don't lie down and do a yoga nidra or legs up the wall and get rid of your anger. I want you to use it as fuel to create the much needed change.
Suzy, we mentioned the word disembodied, and how growing up some of us haven't necessarily been encouraged to think of ourselves, to have this relationship to ourselves. And as I was describing, it was a kind of a surprise to me. I feel like I sleptwalked into it, and then I couldn't sustain it, and then I needed to change things for myself. But I didn't. There must have been clues for me, but I wasn't picking up on them. And there must be clues for lots of women out there that this is happening to them, that they are becoming more distant from their self over time. What would you perhaps say about that in terms of how people begin to notice or reconnect before they get to that tipping point of, I just cannot sustain it?
Yeah. So I think quite often we're waiting for those late warning signs, aren't we, of injury, illness, conflict, rupture in relationship, burnout, depression, anxiety, all of these things. They're the late warning signs. And because we are so disconnected and distracted from self, it's not that just we're disconnected, it's because our attention is being pulled left, right and centre. So I think it's a very individual thing. How do we know that we've lost connection with self? For so many women, it'll be, if you have half an hour to yourself, it's so foreign that you don't know what to do with that time, because you've forgotten the things that you enjoy, or the forms of self-expression that speak to you, because it's been so long since you've done it. It's that feeling of estrangement. It's going to show up in all sorts of different ways. There's not one layer of functioning that's not affected by that disconnection. So it'll show up in our energy levels. It'll show up in our ability to be present, to in our emotional lives, whether we're feeling more reactive or whether we're sort of feeling numb. It'll show up in our thinking. The fact is, if we're disconnected from self, that means we're not hearing the cues from our body that's saying, sweetheart, I need this. I need a drink of water. I need to move my body. I need some sunlight. I need some social connection. Where's the cat? I need to sit with it and just watch it breathe. We're missing all of those signs. Yeah,
we definitely are.
Yeah.
And what you're saying there, it reminds me of some of your posts on Instagram, which where you remind people to have some water, or you remind people to get some sunshine, or go ore hunting and
go to the toilet when you need it.
But instead of don't do that though.
Instead of putting it off, I'll just get that email done. It's.
They're kind of taught that though, aren't they, in school now? You can't go to the toilet when you need it.
Yeah.
So
I don't know about you, but I haven't been able to train my bladder to go at 11 o'clock.
No.
Bad bladder.
Yes. Yeah, there's a lot that needs to change there. And that messaging we're absorbing, it's not just when you go to the toilet. It's the fact that kids, you feel like you miss out on the rewards for not being at school when you're recovering from illness and bereavement and
infuriating.
how does that make us feel about rest and meeting our own human needs? We're still embedded in it. That's what we're seeing left all around us, isn't it?
And actually, when you look at so many women that have chronic health conditions and kind of autoimmune stuff, you know, so for me, I've had endometriosis since the age of 19, and I know Jolene also has it. And for me, that's always, you know, the early warning sign. If I haven't taken care of something, that's the canary in the coal mine, you know, sort of thing. That's the immediate, like, okay. But really, how many of us have got to that stage where our bodies are literally screaming for a break, for some water, for some sun, for some rest? And it's almost
joy.
Joy.
Yes.
It's okay to have joy.
Can we get that on the radar as well?
Can we?
Yes.
How important.
And also this, it feels like when you're little as a child, you're allowed to play. That's really celebrated and seen as important. And I think as adults, we still need to play.
We do.
We need to find ways where we feel a sense of lightness and joy and frivolity in lots of ways. And
So important.
I wonder what would be your advice, Suzy, if somebody was listening, thinking, this resonates and I want to find a way to get more play or joy or pleasure or lightness. What would you encourage them to do?
Okay, generally at some point in every session I have with a client, they'll say, I used to do this. So I think that can be a really useful starting point. What did you used to do? Can you reclaim it? Perhaps maybe it needs to be in a different shape now, but how can you welcome it back into your life? Generally, there's also something that you'd really like to do that you haven't made space for. So what might that be? But even on a really, really simple level, we can use our senses. Let's be open to sensory pleasure. And that's why you mentioned ore hunting before. I tell you what, my life changed when I became an ore hunter, because it's not just being on the lookout for these moments of wonder. The commitment to that is actually self-affirmation. It's me saying, do you know what? I am worthy of these moments of pleasure and connection and belonging. I'm going to give myself permission to make this a priority and seek it out. And when I see it, I'm not going to fritter it away thinking, is it all right for me to be experiencing this? Can I take the time for this? I'm going to give every cell and fibre of my being to this experience and soak it up so that I'm resourced. Because the world needs resource people.
Yeah, absolutely. It's taken me a while to accept that, because my initial reaction to things like rest and sunlight, you know, the basics, was it's not enough. You know, it's like, if I'm going to step back from all that I do and do something for myself, it has to be some kind of big grand thing, and then there was never time for that. Or you know, weaving in, you know, these other moments of resourcing just felt, I didn't get it for a long time, and now I do, thankfully, and I'm still working on it. But I just wonder how many other people feel like that it's not enough, or you know, if I'm going to step back, it's got to, you know, it's got to be precious, it's got to be big, it's got to be a spa weekend away or something like that.
I think there are a lot of people nodding their head in agreement with that, feeling like it's got to be special. I've got to really make it count.
Yes.
So let's do a practice that breaks through all of that. So we were talking earlier about skills. So self-forgiveness, self-compassion, mindfulness. This little practice, and it is a really little practice, helps us develop all of those things. Okay? So can we carefully, mindfully, just rub our hands together to create a little bit of warmth? Not too much warmth if you're already feeling a bit warm, hot inside. But just to kind of come into the sense of we're in the here and now. I'm not yesterday. I'm not in yesterday. I'm not in tomorrow. I'm in the here and now. And then can we tenderly cradle our chin in our hands? Okay. So welcome to the face hug. And if it feels comfortable and it's safe for you to do it, you can let your eyes close. And with this gesture, what we're saying to ourselves is that we are deserving of tenderness. We are deserving of kindness. And all that love and care that we effortlessly, generously extend to other people, we can allow some of that to be turned inwards as well. And we can be safe in the knowledge that that's not a transgression of our values. It's actually a more honest, authentic, and complete expression of them. And just notice how lovely it feels to be held, to be supported, and that we can be our own calm, safe place.
Oh, Suzy, that's so lovely.
Yeah.
You did that.
Isn't that lovely? Yeah. I think quite often it does tend to connect us with our feelings. So sometimes when we do that practice, it can, make us aware of things that perhaps were floating beneath the surface that we hadn't had an awareness of before. But I think this is it. We're coming home to self. You've got to come home to your body. You've got to come home to your senses. You've got to soothe the nervous system so that you can feel safe to give voice with safe people. You know, this is not just a matter of get confident and speak up. You know, our nervous system needs gentle tending. So I would love for everyone to do at least several face hugs a day.
I'm on that. That was beautiful. It was actually quite emotional, isn't it, to hold yourself in that way and to remember that we do have our own backs. Because if we don't,
I love that.
who else does, you know?
Yeah.
It's really important. Thank you, Suzy.
I think about the origins of attachment as well, that if we had a crying baby in front of us, we would pick it up, wouldn't we, through touch, and we would kind of cradle and rock, and we stopped doing that as adults. And there's something about that practice of just using your hands that perhaps you're using to take care of others and turning that inwards, and through touch, I suspect there's really activation of those kind of brain systems that are associated with oxytocin and sort of
feeling
slowing
safe.
down.
Feeling loved, feeling cared for. I think touch is a really, really important part of my toolkit. There are so many different practices that, you know, as a psychologist, most of my practices are actually physical ones involving movement, involving touch, involving the breath. Obviously, there are psychological strategies in there as well, but it's, we need to be rocked. We need to be held.
We need to hug ourselves.
Yeah, we need to be hugged too. And I think this is, at this point in the conversation, it's so important that we also understand that this is not just about us meeting our needs all the time. We need to receive.
Yes.
We need to be cared for. But I think, can we go there? How many of us are highly sensitive people here?
Yeah, for sure.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So I think this is where it gets tricky, because as an HSP, I don't know about you guys, but I'm very in tune with the people around me. I actually often don't need them to say, oh, I'm feeling like this, can you do this for me? I'm reading, I'm perceiving, I'm sensing, I'm forecasting, and I'm responding. Not everyone's an HSP. And so when I'm moving through life and I'm thinking, but hang on, I can forecast your needs. Why can't you forecast mine? What's going on here? But it's understanding that not everyone has that capacity. And if you're in a relationship with someone who doesn't have those skills, it doesn't mean that there's a lack of love. It does mean that we're going to have to be a little bit more direct and potentially really clear on, this is the support that I need. So
true.
sometimes that can feel like inequity in relationship. But I think in these dynamics, if we can look at, well, we're a team. There are these things that I do really well. There are these things that you do really well. And as long as there's reciprocity, it doesn't have to be the same skill. But as long as we're still meeting each other in the ways that we can. But I think that's an important part of the self-advocacy conversation, because if you're reading others and you're thinking, why can't they do the same for me? Well, that's why. And we do have to get skilled in speaking up, and it's okay for us to voice our needs.
It's a hard thing to do, though, isn't
really
it?
hard.
It's a really hard thing.
Hard.
Yeah.
And I'd say as well, Suzy, what about people that don't actually know what they need?
Yes.
You know, they have given so much,
Yes.
and they don't know until they're on the floor.
Yes.
Yeah.
There's a mind map in how to be selfish, where I wanted to literally map out all the different human needs. So it's all the granular stuff that we've already mentioned in terms of the basics of sleep, rest, movement. But we also need things like understanding, acceptance, validation, compassion, comfort. Yeah. So for anyone that's thinking, God, where do I start with that? Can we do another practice?
Yeah.
Okay. Now I'm hoping everyone's got a glass of water.
Yes.
Have you got a glass of water at
do,
hand? Okay. So let's pick up our glass of water. Now the reason why I want to use this is that so many people say, I forget. Okay, but how many times a day do we take a little sip of something, whether it's a cup of tea, cup of coffee, or a glass of water, you know? Okay, so we're coupling this practice with something that we're already doing to help us remember, but also because this changes the sensory experience of drinking. Okay, so let's, and I'm hoping everyone listening at home might be able to do this at some point, right? Can we mindfully place a hand on our heart? Okay. And there's a lovely grounding that comes with that. What this gesture is doing for our nervous system is it's telling our body where it ends and the environment around us begins. So our nervous system knows where we are in space. And that's really grounding, really calming. With that somatic hold of hand on heart, let's now take a little sip of water and just notice. Just notice.
Could actually feel the water. Yes. Watering ourselves.
Yes. That is exactly what I'd hoped you'd say. It really enlivens our sensory awareness. Okay? You feel the temperature of the glass at your lips. You feel the temperature of whatever it is you're drinking, the aroma of it, the flavour of it, how it feels in your mouth, how it feels to swallow it. And it feels juicy and rejuvenating, right?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, so with that, now that we've sort of tuned back in, it's like, oh, hang on, I've just switched my senses back on. There are 2 prompts. Okay, let's take one more little sip just because it's nice. Let's hydrate ourselves. Hydrate our sense of humour here. So the 2 prompts are, first question is, where am I at? What's going on for me right now? Not what's the matter with me? It's what's happening for me right now. Can I just check in with my body? Are there any areas that need a little TLC? Yeah, maybe I'm noticing I haven't moved for a little while. Maybe I need the loo. Maybe my bra's too tight. Yeah, we're just noticing. And then let's also check in. Are there some kind of emotional tones floating about? What's present? Without judgment, we just notice and ask if there are any messages there. And then lastly, let's see, where's our head at? What kind of thoughts are we having right now? And based on those observations, the second prompt is, what do I need? Is there something really simple that I can reach out for that will just meet me where I'm at? And maybe that will be reaching out to another human being and asking them to be there for me. Yeah, but I promise you, the more we do this, the more our body says, sweetie, could you just? Yeah?
And how simple is that? Like, that's not a spa break. That's not a week away. That's a minute or 2 with ourselves. And that is such a powerful connection, Suzy.
It is. It's just it's a simple way of just developing a healthy relationship with self. Yeah. And I think for anyone that's like, oh, how do I know what I need? Well, it's anchored in the body. It will be in sensation. It will be in connecting with feeling. It'll be just noticing, oh, I'm having this persistent thought. Oh, okay. What's that all about? And then the sense of trust comes from knowing self. And I think these little moments where we can just connect and observe what is and allow us to be as we are, I think is really, really empowering.
And not trusting ourselves is the root, I would imagine, of so many of these, moments and, patterns where we're looking for validation, where we're looking for self from other people, aren't we? And building that identity that's actually not us.
That's right. And the self-trust is just so vital for us helping to break free from those patterns where we've been led to believe that, our worth is contingent on how happy we've kept everyone. We were talking earlier about the things that we've got to sit with. Well, sometimes we've got to sit with their disappointment. Sometimes we've got to sit with our own disappointment. But the presence of disappointment doesn't mean that we're doing something wrong. Can't be all things to all people.
Yes.
But without that self-trust, it's so hard to overcome that all of the conditioning that we've been led to believe is true.
There's something really
Sorry, go on.
there's something really quite lovely in your wording of when I was doing the practice. I was noticed you saying, sort of explore the emotional kind of tone in your body, and I was thinking for some individuals that I work with who would be worried about turning into their body for being flooded with emotions, or perhaps feeling like I'm not going to find anything. The way it's framed, which is very much an invitation to be curious about what's there.
Yeah.
It allows for both, doesn't it? Allows for a person not to get swept away by their experience, but just notice the tone of it in quite a broad brush way. But also another individual that perhaps might be struggling to find much. There isn't too much pressure in the way you framed that practice, that you have to search for something and it has to be tension or tightness, or it's really open. And I think that could really help a broader range of people find what's going on.
And you've named it curiosity. This is the skill.
Yeah.
You just want to get curious. Let's just see. And there will be something that just gently voices itself. And the more we check in, the more we will hear.
Yeah.
I found with that practice, Suzy, actually, it felt like you're tuning into the safety of the wisdom within your body. And whereas, like we were saying before, with these checklists of, do this, do that, but actually, and that often doesn't feel safe because it's a survival mode. I'm doing this because everyone said it, but that process of just holding yourself, slowing down, and then listening to that wisdom really provided a steady kind of safety. Actually, I can connect, and I do know, and it's maybe not external, but maybe it's just listening to the wisdom that my body's asking.
It is.
Yeah.
And even this gesture itself is alone is enough.
Yeah.
Sometimes you don't need to do anything after that, because you've just held yourself. And you've just reminded yourself that you are safe. And for so many people who are feeling like, I can't go and do that thing that I want to do because I haven't cleared my to-do list, or I somehow I don't feel deserving of it, I don't feel worthy of it. I think for so many people that's a barrier. They don't feel worthy of that thing, so they don't do it. But this invitation to ground yourself with hand on heart and just have a little sip. The fact is, the feeling of worth comes from tenderness. So we've already hopefully circumvented that barrier of I don't feel worthy of it. We've already connected with self. We've already reminded ourselves of it's okay to receive, and then and hopefully we'll feel less. Less barriers.
And you're not striving for something, then are you? You've just gone gently inwards, and actually you'll find out what you need as opposed to what everybody's saying you need.
Yes.
And what comes up for me when I was doing that, and is something that I'm working on still, a work in progress, is such resistance. Receiving care, even giving myself, receiving my own self-care, there's an instant like bodily rejection of that, and resistance. That kind of self-reliance is so inside of me that I noticed that come up almost like a knee-jerk reaction, even though I am able to feel that tenderness and respect it, and work towards receiving that. There's this knee-jerk reaction that's still ongoing, and I imagine that's something that other people experience as well.
Yeah, definitely. I think for some people, even the act of turning attention inwards can feel shame-inducing.
Yeah.
So we work very gently with this. Self-reliance. We've been taught. I must tend to myself and not need anyone else, and if I need somebody else, somehow that's a deficit. I think the issue there is we're social animals. We need each other.
We do.
And for anyone that feels bad about receiving, I invite them to think about, how did you feel the last time you were of service to someone? What did it feel like?
Well, it felt good. It feels purposeful.
It's really affirming. It fills us with a sense of, I'm a good human being.
Exactly.
I've just done something valuable.
Yeah.
I'm trusted, I'm needed,
Yeah.
I'm valued. And yet when we're sort of thinking I must be all things to myself, we're robbing other people of that beautiful experience of feeling appreciated, of actually giving of themselves and doing something that fills them with joy. So let's not rob other people, and let's also not rob ourselves. And I think it's this interdependence, this connection, it's reciprocity, that it's not just for our health that we need it for the health of our relationships.
And that's different from codependency, right? That kind of interdependent, like self-aware, I'm not going to say the word properly, reciprocity, is so different from that enmeshment where no one's self-aware, where, it's performative, it's demanded, it's cultural, maybe it's expected. It's a completely different dynamic. And I'm thinking about how important it is as well, perhaps as a motivator, to break those cycles for the next generations. We were saying about kind of our families and how I can't imagine, saying to my kids, you have to completely override your needs and not think of yourself. I want them to be self-aware and self-advocating. And even if it's hard to gift this to ourselves and it's a work in progress, it's a gift to them, isn't it?
100%. It needs to be modelled.
My daughter said to me the other day, Mum, I'm so selfish. And I'm like, yes.
Yes. That's brilliant. I love that. Suzy, we could talk to you all day. But as we perhaps come closer to the end of our conversation, I suggested, or I asked if you wouldn't mind bringing in an object that perhaps represented how you hold yourself or something grounding. I wondered if you brought anything in.
I did.
Wonderful.
I've got a few things. In fact, it's kind of, I try and support myself in the simplest of ways. So I'm wearing this jumper that is super soft, and it always just taps me into a feeling of, if you were to cup a little baby chick, can you imagine how tenderly you'd hold them? That's how this jumper helps me feel. I feel cupped by it.
I love that.
But the object it's this necklace. And it was given to me by someone who was really, really dear to me. And what it connects me with, I want so much for this beautiful person who gave it to me. And it reminds me that if I want those things for her, it's also okay to want those things for me. But it also reminds me of, if I'm going to be this anchor in her life, I need to be advocating for myself. Because if I allow myself to be depleted or taken advantage of, I can't be there for her, and she deserves so much. So I wear this and I think of her and I feel connected with her, and it informs my decisions.
I love that. I love that. Especially as I'm wearing a really soft jumper. That the chick description is exactly how this one feels to me. And I'm also wearing a necklace from my daughter. Just staying connected, isn't it? And giving those messages to my body. It's lovely, isn't it? It's really lovely.
Little talisman that we can just check in with.
I
remember my why.
Oh, I've got 2 final questions for you, if that's okay. So if someone listening today recognises themselves in this conversation and realises they've spent years overgiving or neglecting their own needs, where would you gently invite them to begin?
I would say be gentle with your giant heart. Look at how much you care. Look at how much you want for those around you, and that's a really beautiful thing. And we don't need to change that. We just need to broaden it to also include you. And it's possible. We can do it.
That's lovely. And then finally, when you hear the words, "This voice is mine," what do they mean to you?
I love that question. It means I matter too. I matter too.
That's gorgeous. Suzy, thank you so much for being here and talking with us. It's just been, I feel like I've been on a bit of a retreat.
I do.
I feel very calm and connected. It's been wonderful. So thank you so much for being here.
Such a joy. Thank you for this gorgeous exchange. That's what this is. It's an exchange.
It's a co-creation.
It is. And I feel so topped up. So thank you all.
Thank you.